Lesson 7 by Frank V. Robinson. Jesus, who he was and what he came to do. I promised you last week that this week we would continue the study of the Galilean carpenter and try to find out just who and what he actually was. Here again we find a mighty scriptural relation utterly stripped of its real meaning through superstition and human interpretations that have been tacked onto it. Half the present-day religious world believes that he was the Son of God, and the other half believes he wasn't. And if I were to ask these warring factions to prove their contentions, none of them could do it. They are arguing, therefore, in a circle, and will go round and round until they get tired and find some new bone of contention, or until someone shows them some actual fact about what they are arguing. You know, we humans are very much like a bunch of sheep. We will follow the leader, even though he leads us all over a cliff. And so in this religious warfare, which is being waged today between those who believe that Jesus was the Son of God and those who do not believe so, the poor outsider trying to find the real truth follows either one side or the other in their, to me, laughable and foolish arguments. Before they attempt to argue along these lines, either side or both sides should give to the word some concrete evidence that they are knowing at all of what they are battling over. But for now, let's get down to what this Galilean carpenter was and was not. I shall not enter into a discussion with anyone as to whether he had a supernatural conception or not. That fact makes no difference. It wasn't his birth which was so important. It was the fact that he arose from the dead that is so important. It is reasonable to believe, however, that the mighty life spirit who formed the human race in the first place had the authority, should he see fit to do so, to break or violate any law that he had made. Whether this great life spirit did or did not so violate his own law, we shall not state here. Outside of the birth of this carpenter, however, there is no authentic record of his ever having done so. Whether he did so in the case of Jesus, we shall see as we progress. One thing is certain, and that one thing is all that matters, and that one thing is this. Jesus had a perfectly natural physical birth, just as you and I had. No one will deny that. Physically, he came into the world in exactly the same manner as you and I did. There can be no question on that point either. The record is clear. He was fed as a baby in exactly the same manner as you and I were fed. And he went through all the physical functions of life exactly as we did. As a boy, he was reared and he grew up exactly as we did. He ran away from home, was lost, and in general was just an average normal human being, just like my little son Alfred. Probably he was just as much trouble too. I think all our warring Christian friends will grant me these facts. Someone trying to trip me is bound to bring up the point of his running away from his parents and going to the temple, and when chided for that, his reply was that he must be about his father's business. I shall be told that this early in life, at about 12 years of age, he himself knew that he had a mission to accomplish in this world. Surely he did, and so has everyone else who has accomplished anything at all outstanding along religious lines, known this same thing. At the age of 3, I knew that I had a mission to perform. And I do not claim to be God or to have had any miraculous conception either. Now follow me, please. I will concede that he knew, deep down in his own heart, that he had a vital world message to deliver. That I have already explained, but I will not concede that another living soul on earth, with the possible exception of his mother, knew it until 30 years later, when he startled the world with his teachings. For 30 years he had lived as a boy and as a young man among hundreds of other boys and young men, and up to the time he began his ministry, not a living soul suspected that he ever would make the claim to be God or to have a message of world importance. I mention this point to show that he lived and was looked upon as a man and not as a God. Furthermore, I do not concede that he ever did claim to be God himself. He claimed on one occasion that I and my Father are one, and you and I can claim the very self-same thing when we understand who and what we really are, and when we have grasped the secret of communion with the living God. Please remember that you and I, in essence, are in the first and incidentally the only creation of man there ever was, were spiritual beings. According to Moses, there was breathed into our nostrils by God himself his very own life. It is true that we are now, through the sin and disobedience or doubt of our foreparents, manifesting as physical beings. But that fact does not change the fact of who and what man actually is. And I say to you that man, as first created, was essentially the same as God. And I will go one step further with you and say to you that right here and now, man is still essentially the same thing as God. True, the blight of a physical existence is upon him, but that blight is only a temporal thing. And under that blight, and before the blight ever was, man was and is essentially the same thing as God. Now let some of the warring theologists try to get around that fact. I have taken their own Bible for it, too. What was very important in the ministry of this carpenter was the fact that on one occasion he said, "I can of my own self do nothing." And if that doesn't prove that he was a human being, just like you and me, then I do not know what it does prove. Furthermore, after years of the very closest scrutiny of the Scriptures, I am unable to find a single instance where he claimed to have any power of any kind that did not come from the great life spirit that created both him and the entire universe, including you and me. On the other hand, I find him asking specifically not to be worshipped as God. I find him giving all credit for anything he ever did to the same mighty life spirit I am here teaching you about. Now, we have thus far a picture of a man's being born in a manger, which was nothing unusual in those days, and living a perfectly normal life as hundreds of others were living it, until he was about 30 years of age. Nothing mysterious or divine about that, is there? We are told that from his early childhood he manifested a great desire to learn the Old Testament, for that was the only Bible they had in those days, and we are told he loved to go amongst those who were teachers of it and put an entirely different interpretation upon it. This he did, and on many occasions he confounded their teachings by giving them the true interpretation of these same Scriptures. Nothing remarkable about that either, is there? Every religious leader of importance since that time has done the same identical thing, and I imagine it is still being done today. It was perfectly natural for this young man to manifest a pronounced interest in the Scriptures, in view of the fact that he was impressed to the very core of him with the belief that he had come to proclaim to the world a mighty liberating message, and to restore it to a vital living communion with a vital living God. Now let me say at this point that if this carpenter ever taught anything at all, he taught the restoration of the human race, not to himself, but to the living God in that very same day and age in which he lived.